Let me also congratulate Senator Savino on the effort that she has put forth with this bill. I know it's been a very arduous task, and it's painful not only physically for some, but also painful just going through the mental gymnastics and trying to compromise. And I know the governor was very dogmatic as to his concerns and questions. I also appreciate some of the comments that I heard Senator DeFrancisco make as well, and I also am happy that we chose to put the bill on the floor at this time of day as opposed to late in the evening or early morning hours, where the public would not get a sense of what's in this bill and what's not. Mr. President, through you, if Senator Vino will yield, I have a couple of questions I would like to ask.
Senator yields.
Yes.
Senator Savino, through you, Mr. President, I know that they have taken out the smoking portion of this bill. Is there anywhere in this bill in the future that smoking will become a part of this legislation?
Through you, Mr. President, in answer to that question, no, because the bill expressly prohibits a smokable product, marijuana in a smokable form. It would require an act of the legislature.
Thank you. The sponsor will continue yielding.
Sponsor
Yes.
yields.
There is a, in section 7B on page 8, it lists the actual challenges, or it actually lists the diseases that the bill will cover, but then there's a few that it does not list and says that in the future, I guess through the health department and maybe the governor's office, they will determine whether or not to add these areas. Senator Savino, is there a reason why they're not added now? And do you anticipate what the time frame might be for these to be added?
Through you, Mr. President, as you know, the previous version of this bill listed many of those conditions. The Commissioner of Health feels that there's insufficient research to support their inclusion at this time, in spite of the fact that they are included in some statutes in some states. So he is reserving the right, upon further review of those conditions, to add them.
Do you, Mr. President, the sponsor will continue to yield?
Sponsor yields.
Yes.
I also noted somewhere in the bill there was a section where the patient has the right to change the caregiver, correct?
Yes.
Do you, Mr. President, if the sponsor will continue to yield?
Sponsor yields.
Is there any consideration taken to some of these physical impairments that these individuals have that might be mentally debilitating, in that they won't be able to determine whether or not they want to keep that caregiver or be in the right mind? For instance, if a person has Alzheimer's, is that person going to be given the same right to determine whether or not they want to maintain that caregiver?
Well, through you, Mr. President, patients who have Alzheimer's are not eligible to be medical marijuana patients at this current time. But I think the question you're asking is if you have a patient who is a certified patient under this program with a recommendation by their physician, and they then designate a caregiver, which a caregiver under this statute would be someone who is registered by the State Department of Health to be able to obtain the product for their patient, which could be a family member. Could they change that person? Yes, they could.
Mr. President, the sponsor will continue to yield.
Sponsor yields.
I appreciate the sponsor's response. I just want to get some more clarity. I know Alzheimer's is not part of it at this point, but again, the question is, assuming Alzheimer's will be, and I believe it will be down the road as you continue to push for amendments, when it comes to someone with Alzheimer's, and you know the challenge that an Alzheimer's patient has just with mental clarity, will that person have the ability to go to their doctor or the Department of Health and say, I no longer want this caregiver who at that point in time may be the right caregiver for them?
And through you, Mr. President, I would assume that's possible, assuming that that patient was able to make decisions for themselves. Normally, patients that are incapacitated in that way designate through a healthcare proxy or a guardianship someone to make those decisions for them.
Okay. On the penalty portion, there was a section, page 85A, and it talks about the allowed amount will be 1 month supply, at which they would give someone medical marijuana. And then, I believe it's in the penalty phase, they talk about in the criminal retention and medical marijuana, is a person guilty of this new crime when they are a certified patient or caregiver who knowingly obtains or possesses or stores or maintains more than the amount of the medical marijuana that they are authorized to possess. Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor continue to yield.
Yes.
I'm just a little confused about if they are, according to section, page 8, section 5A, if they're given a certain amount, a monthly supply, how is it that, or what under circumstances do you believe that they can and will possess more than the authorized amount?
Through you, Mr. President, this section, this new criminal penalty, was insisted upon by the governor and the superintendent of police because of a concern that they have about patients potentially stockpiling their medical marijuana. As you stated, under the proposed bill, marijuana patients would be entitled to have no more than a 30-day supply, similar to what we do now with prescription drugs and Schedule II substances. However, they are able to have what they call 30 days plus 7. They get within 7 days of the end of their 30-day supply, they could renew. What the superintendent of police is concerned about is that people hold on, don't use it, hold on to it, begin to stockpile it for the purposes of diversion.
Mr. President, the sponsor will continue to yield.
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
There's a section that talks about the termination of the program. The governor has a fail-safe piece. There's a public health safety part to it. The question is, has there been consideration given, and maybe the health department will do so in the future, if you have a program that is now in existence for, let's say, a year, the particular patient has now grown accustomed to the medical marijuana dosage, it is helping them, they're using it, and then the governor, because of information by the health department or the superintendent of police, decides it is now time to terminate the program. Has consideration been given to that patient as to the weaning off of now the marijuana, which has now been cut off because the governor has determined it is no longer viable?
Through you, Mr. President, that's an excellent question, Senator Smith. It is one that I have concern about, and during there's been a lot mentioned about the 18 months and how long it's going to take. In fact, requiring a timeline for the start of this program was something that I insisted upon. Originally, the governor and the commissioner of health wanted to have an open-ended process, which could have gone into several years, which is something we've seen in other states, New Jersey being one of them. So 18 months may seem like a lifetime, but it's really a fairly good period of time to establish rules and regulations. It is during that period of time where there will be a public comment period. We are going to have an opportunity to weigh in to address just an issue like the one you just pointed out. What we want to make sure that we do during that 18-month period is help the Department of Health establish a very tightly controlled, regulated system so that it can give to the governor what he claims he needs, which is comfort, knowing that the system is safe, secure, and serving its intended purpose, so that we don't wind up with a scenario where there is some public health hazard that could be invoked by either Commissioner of Health or Superintendent of Police, justifying the governor pulling the plug. The governor and the Commissioner of Health do have the right under this statute, though, to pull the license of any registered organization that they determine is acting in violation of the program. So there's a safeguard in that as well.
Okay. Mr. President, through you, the sponsor will continue to yield for a couple more questions.
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Just on the business aspect of what I consider this to be a new industry, is as you locate these new dispensers, is these dispensers going to be derived from New York businesses? Are they coming from out of the state being allowed to open the business, or will it be restricted to New York farmers, New York entrepreneurs, etc.?
Through you, Mr. President, it must be a New York State entity. However, that does not preclude people from coming into the New York market, much the way they do now when the Startup New York program, although this would not be eligible for Startup New York. But there's no bar. However, they would have to establish a New York State entity. Could, in answer to your question about a farm, could a farmer in New York State apply for this license? Certainly. There are conditions in the bill about, though, the who can and can't, what conditions they must meet to apply, whether it's having access to property, acquiring property, being able to, in the absence of having property, being able to post a $2 million bond. We only want serious individuals applying for licenses in this state. There are also a series of background checks and other requirements that they'll have to submit to. Marijuana grown in this state must be grown indoors in a tightly controlled, secure, 24-hour secured facility. A greenhouse could be one of them, but it couldn't be in open farmland.
Okay. Mr. President, through you, the sponsor would yield for one more question.
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Again, on the business side, I didn't see in the bill, and I read through it last night, had a lot of conversations with people from the community about it, but I didn't see in the bill where there is a section or where it would require any of the new dispensers and or businesses to have a requirement in support of our veterans as well as minority and women-owned businesses.
Through you, Mr. President, I don't believe it is in the statute, but it's something that could be in the regulations.
Okay. On the bill, Mr. President? Thank you.
Senator Smith on the bill.
And again, let me thank Senator Savino for her effort and all the work, all my colleagues as well. This is not an easy bill. It's not easy because of the concerns that have been raised by many of my colleagues, Senator DeFrancisco, Senator Libous, Senator O'Brien, and my conversations up until 1 o'clock last night, in particular from people in my district, was 50-50, to be honest with you. There were members who supported it, and there were members who were opposed to it for a host of reasons. And it's very difficult in terms of where I am in this bill, and it took me a while to get to where I am because of some discussion, as people had talked about, the gateway not having enough medical input on it. But, Mr. President and my colleagues, it came down to two things for me. One was about choice, and the other one was about pain. And if I have to make a vote today regarding whether I'm going to have a choice of what to do about medical marijuana or helping someone relieve the pain, I have to come down on the side on pain. And so, while it's not been an easy road for me in terms of deliberating this bill, I want to congratulate Senator Savino. I will be voting for this bill, and I do hope in the near future, as you look to amend it, some of the things that were raised today on the business side and on the patient side and health side will be considered. So, Mr. President, I will be voting aye for the bill.